Hi, comrade. Welcome to our podcast series. These episodes feature the best of Lab-Left, an international forum organized by Szikra Movement in collaboration with Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. We gathered in Budapest in November 2024 in order to discuss how to win from the left. Thanks for tuning in. This conversation with James Schneider, Director of Communications of Progressive International, was recorded by Aaron Rossman Kiss. Good morning.
Morning.
James. It's the morning of Sunday, the 24th of November, last day of Lab-Left. We started in an ambitious fashion today, 10 a.m. panel after the party. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling better than I thought I would, actually. I'm feeling alive, which is a good thing after a bit of drinking, and quite happy and inspired. It's been a very nice so far. I mean, of course, things could go terribly wrong this afternoon, but we still have a few hours. There's still a few hours for some terrible scandal to break out. But no, so
A terrible take.
yeah, terrible take. So no, so far it's been really lovely, and I think there are probably two main things that, for me, I would focus on. Firstly, despite the temperature being very cold, the space has felt very, very warm. This venue is a very
Legendary.
It's a very cool space. The food, the coffee, I know this is going to sound very peculiar, but I had some water with rosemary in this morning, and it made me feel very.
Would never happen in Britain.
Would never happen. No. But I think this stuff is important. We can't truly organize for collective power if we don't know how to be together and how to be able to pull off those small types of collective action and collective pleasure and collective comfort, which I think you guys have done here. So I think. So starting from that level, I think until you have that, doing the politics is difficult. And then the second thing, which I think again is the prerequisite to a meaningful discussion about politics. Yesterday started with sessions from people who are really doing things, with housing organisers, with labour organisers, and then with municipal organisers. And I think focusing things on how people, what people are actually doing, and then scaling out from that to talk about the broader political abstractions and the moment in which we're in is completely the right way around. So I would congratulate you on I think those two key building blocks to have a successful conference. And those are the sorts of things which are generally left out. People think, who are the thinkers that I want to get? What are the ideas that we have to cover? But unless you're bringing people together and you're focusing on what you're actually going to do, there isn't that much point talking.
This was a sponsored post. Thanks for your endorsements. It has been cold. This is also a reflection of the energy crisis, basically, and the old infrastructure in the building, because basically this is a building that's maintained together with a municipality, and there's just no money because the municipalities have been bled dry. So there's no retrofitting, and the electricity system is extremely ancient. And that's why as soon as we plug in more heaters than we thought we could, things just black out.
Well, it shows there was something which, can't remember his name, it begins with B. He's Bolage on the first panel yesterday morning that Housing was talking about, where he was saying, really, it's a very narrow window in history where at least the only slightly utopian mass house building and mass civic infrastructure building, it's roughly a kind of 30-year window. And he said, we're living and trying to defend that physical inheritance as well as the political inheritance. And we're sitting in it now. We're sitting in, a building from that time that isn't being kept up in the way it should, but it's still here. And we're
right. But that's also an interesting thing, how political imaginaries attach themselves to very specific moments in time, and now there's more and more conversation about how like the idea of a growth premise social model is increasingly untenable in the face of climate breakdown.
Well, the question has always been growth for who? I mean, there were two issues on the growth point. I mean, firstly, which is why I think degrowth is a terrible framing. We'll talk about what it is in substance, but a terrible framing. Because for most of the world's population, full stop, and then for most of the population in most global north countries, it hasn't been growth for most people. I mean, the numbers on a spreadsheet might go up, but that doesn't.
Very specific spreadsheets
on very specific people, whereas the public realm, the civic infrastructure that we all share and the living standards that people have, the amount of time that they have for themselves, for their families, to do community activities, whatever it might be, is all been in retreat. So it's why I think that what we're doing here in this, in an old building, bringing it to life in some way, it doesn't register as growth on the spreadsheet, but I mean, clearly we've made something.
Spiritual growth, political
stuff's
growth.
Happening. I hope so. Stuff's happening. So there's that. Then there's the other thing, which is about material throughput, which is something we're all going to have to wrestle with. And by we all, I genuinely actually mean us all, and the ruling class and everyone else. Because it seems like not only is there the issue with fossil fuels, and even if fossil fuels weren't leading to geological change that normally takes many tens of thousands of years, is happening over the course of a century. That's which is what is really happening if you look at sort of Earth time. Even if that weren't happening, fossil fuels are finite and will run out. There is maybe 40 years worth of deposits of them anyway. So in order to power our energy system, we would need to go to other things anyway. And that poses two problems. And the first is there's not enough zinc, copper, lithium, cobalt in known reserves or suspected reserves in the world in order to do that.
Maintain the same
level. one time over. But then secondly, as we were hearing yesterday on the panel from the Serbian struggle against lithium extraction, the so-called green energy and renewable energy, it's still taking a resource. It's still resource-based. It still has to take a resource out of the ground. There is a whole social and environmental process that does, which is not neutral. It's not neutral in terms of changes to the environment, in terms of water and agriculture and so on, but it's not neutral as a social process, because again, we see the US, for example, trying to create through its critical minerals idea and friendshoring and nearshoring its own value chain with it at the top, and all of the resource sending countries are being the exploitation continues. There's from unequal and uneven exchange, more than 10% of global GDP, more than 10% of global economic output is sucked for no cost from the south to the north through the exchange of for mining and minerals. Now, as we become even more dependent on them for the energy systems that we do need, of course, we need batteries, we need solar panels, we need wind, we need all of these things. But that process then intensifies.
Yeah, and we see rather than a paradigm shifts in the models of accumulation, we see basically the entrenchments of the same profit-driven logic.
Which is why I was saying yesterday, we still live in the colonial mode of accumulation. the colonials that accumulate, it changes, right? It became more fossil fuel powered, and that had a tremendous impact on the world. The global population is about 8 times bigger than it would be if we hadn't moved to fossil fuels. It did power the ability for expansion, but that itself was based on the extraction, the colonial extraction for free the theft, which continues all the way through to this day, despite changing political arrangements. The basic structures are the same, and you see that as the move from, we haven't moved from fossil capital to mineral capital, but as mineral capital increases in its share of an overall increasing thing, as still fossil fuels use increases dramatically.
Yes. And I think basically what we tried to do in putting these different panels together is we had to have a diversity of perspectives and struggles, and we were hoping that their interconnectedness would emerge kind of organically. And I feel they have. Like even now, we were speaking about something else, and we started talking about new modes of energy systems and extractive industries, just to show how things are connected. In the panel we had yesterday with you, we were also trying to take this bird's eye view, basically, whereas the other panels focused on specific issues, labor, housing, municipal politics. We were trying to look at how to put these different struggles in a cohesive and strategic conversation. What were your takeaways? Well, what was missing, you feel, from the discussion yesterday?
I think my main takeaway is that if we take the frame of the colonial mode of accumulation as the thing which we're overcoming, then you're talking about already a 500-year human epoch, which itself has changed our geological era into a new era. So the scale of what we have to do is tremendous.
Yes.
Going back to the point raised about that 30-year window where we built, in many countries, built housing and industry, and that's the high point, let's say, of 100 years of struggle, which was organically growing, of course, with ups and downs and its own specific histories in different countries and so on. But that was a huge, big process. And
it didn't emerge out of nothing.
Didn't just emerge out of nothing. And I think, now we fell off. We've had 40, 50 years of the defeat of that building of power, that building of popular power, more democratic, of course, incomplete and so on and so forth, but in broad terms. And I think now we're at the bottom. We can only begin to see how big a process it is to raise up. So, building the block is not about winning the election next year. It's not about building although of course we want to win the election next year.
You should.
Yeah, of course, right. Whatever. And it's not about just building the alliances around a particular campaign. It's talking about how can you build sufficient unity among enough of the majority of people in a given society, and then also globally, to be able to overhaul a 500-year-old system which dehumanizes everybody. So I'm not saying that was missing from the discussion, but I think often, maybe, but when we think about winning and so on, it feels close, like we could just do this thing and that thing and then we win. Every small advance every win is just hoping to build an extra, lay an extra stone in that building up of that power that is sufficient, that it can confront the power we face. Because as you see, I think the last few years should be clarifying for us. We can see the system much more clearly. Let's take some things that have happened in the last few years, where it's proof that the system in which we live is antithetical to human life. It's not a failure. It's not doing it correctly. The system itself is antithetical. So first of all, let's take COVID.
But wait, can I just I guess COVID and Palestine and all these issues
and climate,
and yes, it can come up, but I feel it's also such a challenging political moment for all of us because these things have been laid bare. It's obvious, and it doesn't seem to matter. And for example, what has been so disempowering with the ongoing genocide in Palestine, I feel, has been that so many different forms of protests have been tried, ranging from boycotts to blocking ports, to sit-ins, and like now we have the ICC issuing warrants. So very different forms of action have been taken by very different groups of people, and still, in the face of this brute force, have been kind of incapable of stopping it in any meaningful way.
So I think that should be dramatically motivating and clarifying. And I think clarity is important. We cannot reform our way. We cannot petition our way. Let's look at the history of social struggle over the last, let's say, 300 years. What's the first thing that people always did? They would write a petition and give it to the king. Of course, the king will help us. The king, the power authority is meant to. We're told that the system is set up in some way as just, but that never works, and we can see that very clearly now. And on these three, world-changing events, the pandemic, climate breakdown, and the genocide in Gaza, we can see that the system is set up to do these things. It's not set up to try to manage them, to make it okay. It's a failure of the system that the ICC is not able to do that. No, here we see what was hegemony, what was a lie, be revealed. Look, let's take the international law, the rules, the so-called rules-based international order. Okay, so you can see that it was a nice idea, and it was a complete fiction because it served the interests of one side, right? As soon as it doesn't serve the U.S. imperial interest, it's tossed aside. Yes, it's fake. You see the same thing in the pandemic with the World Trade Organization. The idea that we come together to organize some trade rules okay, that sounds nice. It's a sensible order, even if it's not set up in the ways in which we like. We can try to act within it and reform it in a different way. No, they decided to kill millions of people and harm billions of people in terms of livelihoods and all the rest of it by not releasing the recipe for the vaccines. We could have produced, in 1 year, manufactured and delivered vaccines to every single person on Earth with the technical capacity we had on Earth, right? We had the manufacturing and the delivery capacity to do that in 1 year, and yet it wasn't done because that is actually how the system works.
But I'm wondering as well, so during COVID, it was a moment of reckoning, of isolation in many ways, but also I think lots of us held the hope that by laying bare the inner workings of the system, something had to change.
So what have we done then? So there's something that has to change is us. And something that has to change is we as the soul. Well, the soul, of course, but the inner has to be related to the outer. Yes, of course, we have to have processes of personal development and spirituality and whatever it might be. But in order to be involved, and that can only be really strengthened by being involved in the collective project in the outside, which is trying to build counterpower. That's the thing that we actually have to do now. When I say this, I'm not saying, and I've got a magic solution, and this is where it's happened perfectly, and all we have to do is copy that thing. No, but the point is that we have to look at the terrible reality of the murderous, and it is murderous. If you okay, you see it obviously very clearly in Palestine, lots of children being blown up and burnt alive and so on and so forth. Okay, you can see the murderousness there. The more technocratic decision of the rich countries to block the waiver for intellectual property, okay, it's a bit more removed, but I mean, the people who are doing the killing or some of the people who are doing the killing via drones and via, AI selected targets to blow up hospitals, which will then kill tens of thousands of people in excess deaths because they've got no medical care. I mean, they always try to keep themselves arm's length from the killing. I mean, the ruling class, and with climate breakdown, which COP just finished, COP, which is a joke, but it just finished, and they've basically said, well, in reality, we're not going to do very much. In reality, we're not going to meet the needs of the majority of people on Earth, which is a death sentence for lots of people. So if we're going to realize those things, it's not just enough to say them and to think that therefore things can change. We have to actually gain some level of organization of how, which, coming back to the more prosaic things, which starts from an ability to be together. It starts from an ability.
It's not prosaic, because that's the...
No, it's foundational.
Minimum.
It's foundational, but it seems, it could be presented as ridiculous. I don't think it is, but it could be presented as ridiculous to go from the predictable deaths of tens of millions of people to our ability to have a meal together. Like, that seems like a very big gap. But unless we are able to do things together, and of course we're increasingly atomized and divided and so on and so forth, there's no surprise that the period which got us there was sufficient democratic power in the world, again, incomplete, imperfect, etc., that allowed us to sit in this building that we're currently sitting in to be built, was because people were able to do things together. There was a concentration of people in urban spaces and in factories and in mines, concentration of people, and they learned how to be powerful. And a lot of learning how to be powerful is really got nothing to do with talking about politics and so on and so forth. I mean, we're weird. We like to talk about politics all the time, but
very bizarre.
We're weird. The institutions which actually built that working class power and kept together were not the journals and the theoreticians and so forth. It's like the working men's club, the social institutions that are there.
That's exactly what we've tried to do with Szikra Movement as well, is to do something that basically traditionally left-wing movements have done, which is just have our own institutions, have these spaces to come together, whether it is like just for reading club, reading poetry, reading theory, watching films, discussing it, because this is basically, we realized what most people are craving for, and which they're not getting at all from the system.
And I mean, I think that's incredibly important, and there's a deep need for that, and it can become political power if you look at, or it can take an electoral expression, let's say, afterwards. We had a general election in Britain in July, and 5 independents from the left of Labour were elected, which doesn't sound like very much, but in Britain that had happened, I think, 3 individuals had won in our entire history as independents from the left of Labour. And one of them was Jeremy Corbyn, and that's
Heard of him?
Yeah. That's slightly too generous, but the 4 other ones were in constituencies that have well-organized and large Muslim communities. And obviously this has been mischaracterized and Islamophobically mischaracterized, but how was it that they were able to win incredibly safe Labour seats from nowhere, starting with basically no campaign in a snap election with no money, without name, identity, etc., etc., etc.? Because the mosques do provide that kind of space. It's one of the last remaining places that where like people.
It's comfy.
Yeah, and people, there's a welfare element, there's a social element, there's a cultural element, there's just a gathering together thing, there's a routineness to it. I think routines are very important, which we lose in the world in which we live, and those things can take a collective that can form into some kind of collective will, and a collective will take a political expression. So this is not me saying that we need more mosques per se, or churches per se.
You just said we need more mosques.
Sure, but we know we need more. We need more places where people can be together, can do things with each other, because that is the basis on which any progressive, democratic, political change can come.
And that's why what I was telling us yesterday, trade union organizer from Albania, was so inspiring about how she also, as part of her organizing task, started going to a mosque in these very conservative communities and finding these spaces of sociality necessary to be able to speak to people on their level.
And that, also things, humans we're messed up and confused and brilliant, and we think multiple things at the same time, and we're the products of our environment, but we're capable of new thought. We're all of these things all mixed up. And yeah, I thought Bora's description of that organizing was really beautiful, because she remained consistent with her politics and her principles, and she moved people both in the direction of being able to organize, but also she moved people in an anti-patriarchal direction, but not through lecturing, through being with people, building up trust, doing a thing collectively. This is another thing which I think on the left we've completely lost sight of, is we're obsessed with nouns and we don't really bother with verbs. Like, we should be doing things is much, much, much more important than saying things. And okay, I know this is silly because, or could be seen as silly, because I'm, at least in this place, cast in a more theoretical or abstraction role. But all of
yes, you're the only theoretical cast member of this.
But the theory and also strategy, generally speaking, it comes after the fact.
Yes,
it's people actually already do the thing, and then somebody, and then they read books, and then but then someone who's good at structuring that so it's easier to understand what happened, and then that's called theory and strategy. But really, it comes afterwards. When it doesn't start with some clever people in the room who write a theory, write a strategy, and
then usually doesn't work out.
It never works out. Never works out. That's why there isn't a single Trotsky sect, for example, which has ever taken power or
They're correct.
But yes, there you go. But they can sit in a room and be and be correct. And
is that also what keeps you optimistic and motivated? In a way, the surprising element of human history.
Yes, but yes, human history is extremely surprising, and all sorts of inspiring things happen all the time. But I think to have, optimism, but optimism isn't something which comes from an analysis of the objective circumstances. I think optimism comes from two places. One, it's a drive, like it's an internal drive, like you, for whatever reason, you don't see how wrong the world is, and think, therefore, we must be able to do something about that, and that's one drive. And the real thing, the biggest thing that gives people hope and optimism, is being part of something together. Let's take the experience of the left in Britain over the last 10 years. The Corbyn period was enormously hopeful and inspiring for hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of...
That's only in Britain. Yeah, many of us.
Fine, so for many people, because there's a collective project and stuff's happening all the time. If you look at it objectively, objectively the chances for us to succeed were extremely small. By historical measures, by the power of the state, by all of those things. But we were incredibly optimistic. Not because we were stupid, but because we had a chance. Because we were active, we were doing something together. Everything that each person did added up to something larger. It was more than the sum of its parts. The most amazing thing to feel like you're more than some of their parts. Why do people play team sports?
Have you felt this feeling since then?
So then to say, and then what's happened in the last five years across the British left, a lot of people have been, isolated and felt different types of depression and alienation and so on from that. Now, I haven't felt hope in exactly the same way as that, but there have been huge numbers of extremely inspiring things that have happened in the world in the last 5 years. I mean, world historically, the largest strike in human history happened in the Indian farmers' strike.
Yes. Amazing. Incredible levels of organizing in the West seem totally out of reach.
Seem completely, huge, enormous, amazing things are happening all of the time, and people are not stupid. And if left organizers end up getting cynical, then they're useless, I think. You should be ruthlessly cynical about the system, ruthlessly cynical about the power of the ruling class, but endlessly hopeful and optimistic about people's capacity to do different things, because that is also what history shows us. Yes, often when we try to do different things, we get whacked on the head by the powerful, but that doesn't mean that we stop doing that. It just means we have to learn from that and do it again, do it better, take the wins when we can take the wins, and build and go and build.
I think that's a really nice place to end it. So, thanks for being here with us in Budapest.
Thanks for having me. It's been lovely.
It has.
Thanks for tuning in. To find every other episode, follow our feed. This episode was produced by Lab-Left-nek. Thanks to everyone who made it possible.
Zengünk harang, veled együtt zeng a szívem, őt látom, jön már felém. Musikál a világ, vele bőrül a nyár, tudom én, jön a fényborús napok után. Hozd vissza őt, végtelen nagy szerelem.